Okay, I'm kind of excited about our next story here. Our top most read story this week, and actually the top most read story for actually the past few weeks, looking at our readership numbers here, was from Tony Uphoff, who's the president and CEO of Thomas Publishing Company. The article was Navigating the Skills Gap, How U.S. Manufacturing Can Thrive Again, and it did a great job of summarizing the decline of manufacturing in the U.S., not just in actual jobs, but maybe, I think, more importantly, the decline of positive perception of manufacturing. We've talked about this before. Manufacturing, particularly with the beginning of the internet age, manufacturing, ooh, dirty fingernails kind of stuff, and it got kind of a bad rap.
Yeah, sure.
So if you couple that with the skills gap, you have a deficit of ready-to-go employees for today's manufacturing industry, and that has had a big impact. But there's a solution, several solutions actually, and here to talk about that with us is Tony Uphoff, President and CEO of Thomas Publishing Company. Hi, Tony. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Dirk and Mike. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, let's get right into it. In your article, you point to a 2015 report by Deloitte and the Manufacturing Institute that showed that while 3.4 million manufacturing jobs will be vacated by retiring baby boomers, just 1.4 million of them will be filled by qualified candidates, and that leaves a deficit in the manufacturing space of about 2 million jobs. So how did we get here?
Yeah, it's really remarkable. If you look at the post-war economy in the United States for the last 50 years, what started to happen is very successful custom manufacturing businesses in particular that were the lifeblood of the U.S. manufacturing economy. People came back and filled those jobs, and there was a reasonable economy that continued for many years after it. But then we started to see the future appeared to be primarily driven by the desire for a 4-year degree, and our education system started to change, emphasizing more 4-year degree programs. And the children of a lot of these, or grandchildren, a lot of these folks who had run these very successful family businesses were creating an environment where their kids weren't prepared to take those businesses over. And as now we're seeing most of these baby boomers retire, there's an enormous skills gap, and we haven't filled that gap really. The vocational schools that were really part of the 2-year college degree program started to change their curriculum as well to more business-oriented curriculum. So we've created a huge gap. The irony of this is it's coming at a time as well where we're starting to see a rebound in U.S. manufacturing. So it's exacerbating this skills gap.
And part of this, Tony, I think, is maybe points to a sense of productivity. And productivity is something that, we look at and say, that's great. Productivity is a wonderful thing in manufacturing, but many times what productivity means is, you can do more with fewer employees. Certainly we've seen a lot of automation come in and reduce jobs too. So is that a contributing factor to some of this too, is this increase in productivity in U.S. manufacturing?
I think it's a huge contributing factor. I think it's very popular for many people to assume that a lot of U.S. manufacturing jobs went offshore, went to other countries. The reality of it is some of that certainly did happen. There's evidence of that. But more importantly, it's the disruption of technology. You just nailed it. I mean, we've seen a tremendous influx of new technologies that have automated the factory floor, that have done, remarkable things to change the way manufacturing works. Now, at the same time, we think there's a huge opportunity there, though, because it doesn't do away with the need for skilled labor. If anything, what it's now creating is the skilled labor today and into the future is that part art, part science, because custom manufacturing is really an artist's role, but it also has to understand technology today. So you're melding those two skill sets. And
in your article, you point to STEM curriculum, technical training, and apprenticeships that you say would help restore U.S. manufacturing. And we could probably go on forever about any one of those. I think they're all important topics. But which of these is most critical to you, do you think, and why is that?
Boy, could I choose 1A, 1B, 1C?
Exactly.
on that, hey, look, all kidding aside, I think they're all critically important. I think increasingly as we study the issue, and I'll give you a bit of perspective on how we look at this issue. So for 120 years, Thomas has been the primary resource for product selection and supplier evaluation, for the industrial markets. Today, every 2 seconds, somebody uses our thomasnet.com platform to do just that. We have over 500,000 suppliers that are on the platform. So we can look at this from a very interesting series of data-driven angles. And one of the things that we think is starting to happen is the best avenue could very well be in local apprenticeships. Because when we look across the 10,000 plus growing customers we have that are advertising, that are custom manufacturing companies, where they are seeing some success is local action to drive apprenticeships in their area. So there's, STEM curriculum is fantastic to see, and we certainly want to advocate for that. There's broader based programs, but I think in the spirit of what's going to impact some of these manufacturing companies, it is programs, and some could be subsidized, that are going to, help young people find a path in through paid apprenticeships programs and organized apprenticeship programs where they can learn that balance between art and science and technology that makes these jobs so attractive, but also the skills required to be successful in those types of jobs.
So, Tony, other than apprenticeships, of course, apprenticeships are critically important, but are there other examples of things that you see that maybe are working really well out there in the field that you think we should look at having more of?
Well, I think to a great extent, and you're seeing this happening in some locales, and I think you touched on it earlier, there's a small but very steady growing reframing, reimagining, rebranding, if you will, of what a manufacturing job is, right? So if you think of television programming today, shows like Mythbusters and, some of the Bot Wars TV shows are actually celebrating to a great extent a bit of geekdom around manufacturing and working with your hands and building things. And we think we can see that there is, particularly for the millennial generation, an interest in wanting to produce something. So almost an interesting counterbalance from knowledge work, which for a certain generation might be wildly unsatisfying, to something that, boy, at the end of the day, end of the week, end of the month, I can physically see a product that I helped to produce. So while it might sound kind of funny, not that we're advocating a marketing or branding around some of this, but I think highlighting how satisfying these types of roles are. And for a lot of young people as well, coming out of an environment where perhaps they're not paying off a 4-year university degree with student debt, but having some apprenticeship or job training where they can step in without a lot of student debt and step into a job that pays well and that's a long-term career. We think that the positioning around that is also very attractive. So what we're seeing is companies are starting to showcase this. And I think the broader media is starting to catch on that while U.S. manufacturing is on a bit of a resurgence, part of the reason for that is I think people are discovering not only is this a great economic engine, it's actually a really satisfying career opportunity for people.
And I guess finally, well, actually, I got 2 more questions. We'll get to them real quick, hopefully. Going back to apprenticeship programs just for a bit. So you mentioned local apprenticeship programs. Do these programs, are they typically coming from a manufacturer? A manufacturer will start up an apprenticeship program just for their company, or are these more local initiatives that are generated by some sort of county office or a local vocational school or junior college? Where are these local apprenticeship programs coming from?
All the above.
Okay.
So we're seeing companies just attack this on their own and set up, local programs. We are seeing local, I guess I'd think of this as city government institutions get involved in areas where they're helping to subsidize apprenticeship programs and or just simply helping to promote, programs like apprenticeships. It's happening at all levels. We emphasize that we believe that the path at a grassroots level is really important because, that's where we think that those things are going to happen. Jobs are local by nature. I live in a community and I want to work in that community and I want to look for opportunities. So where we want to see more of that is programs, whether it's subsidized by city or statewide governmental institutions, and or associations are also starting to step into this as well. Regional manufacturing associations, we think, have done a tremendous job. We'd love to see them do even more because part of this is there's an interest right? We can clearly see where the jobs are. This is one of those classic examples is we need the organizing mechanisms to match an interest in a job opportunity with the job itself, if that makes sense. So I think those local manufacturing associations can play a huge role in helping to create awareness around those apprenticeship programs and or in many cases help create a template so that local manufacturers can understand how to structure an apprenticeship program for their company.
Okay. And finally, are we turning a corner, do you think? In other words, do we seem to be funneling more people back into manufacturing? Is it getting sexy again? Or are people signing up for these apprenticeship programs? Are we starting to see an uptick?
I think there's no question we're starting to see an uptick. And I think it would not be a wild proclamation to say we're at the beginning of what I would think of as a renaissance in U.S. manufacturing. And I mean that for two reasons. One is something you posed earlier is the disruptive nature of technology. You have a generation of people that grew up with many of these technologies. They take them for granted. It's intuitive to them. And when you combine an interest in wanting to learn about manufacturing and they're digital natives, if you will, they're going to take this in ways we haven't even dreamed of. And I think this rising interest in wanting to produce things that you can see and touch and feel, I think is going to touch off really a remarkable era. Many of the studies, some of which that you've mentioned, the Deloitte study, has noted a distinctive lift in the positive nature of U.S. manufacturing-based jobs with millennials. And that's irrefutable data. And we can see a lot of interest in our demographics as well. If you look of our registered user base of about 500,000 users of ThomasNet, we've seen an enormous lift in the 18 to 35-year-old category over the last year. And our stretch goes all the way into 65 plus. But we take that as another positive sign that you're seeing this younger generation is very interested in these types of opportunities, and they're clearly now in the workforce, as evidenced by using platforms like thomasnet.com.
All right, that's great. Well, Tony Uphoff, President and CEO of Thomas Publishing Company and author of Navigating the Skills Gap, How U.S. Manufacturing Can Thrive Again. Tony, thanks for joining us.
Mike and Dirk, thanks again. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Thanks.